So if you haven't seen the Netflix Avatar: The Last Airbender or haven't finished it, you can leave now because I will be talking like in depth about like spoilers and stuff like that. So fair warning, don't say I didn't tell you. I would say overall the show it wasn't awful. Like I've seen people say that it's just as bad as the movie, the M Night Shyamalan movie, and that's outrageous. That's outrageous. This is a step above that. Like I don't think people have seen that show in a while or seen that movie in a while.
My name is Aang, and I'm the Avatar.
That was a wild take. It's not as bad as the movie, but it's not great, I would say. There are some things that like hold the series back, but there's also some good in it. And I'm gonna start with the good. I think the good is that, it gives us new perspective on things we didn't see in the original show. The main thing being the air nomad attack that's heavily featured in the trailers. You really get to see that like it wasn't a one-sided like fight. It wasn't like the Fire Nation like completely like wiped out the air nomads with ease. Just seeing it from like their perspective was a lot. Also within that, I think because it happened during Sozin's comment, and other than Fire Lord Sozin, all the other firebenders looked like they were just like normally firebending. Like it wasn't as powerful as like it should have been with like the Sozin comment thing, but that's whatever. They also expanded a lot on Zuko and Iroh's relationship. I thought that was really good. There's like a scene, Iroh's son, Lu-Ten, they're at the funeral, and Zuko basically gives Iroh back a medallion that Lu-Ten gave him. And Lu-Ten or Iroh's like tearing up about it because like you really get to see that like Zuko like really cared. Like in the original show, we already saw that he cared, but this one it felt like it was like a deeper level of caring and understanding and compassion that we didn't see in the original. So that I liked. I liked that a lot. And it also kind of gave me like I won't say it's an idea, but like it made me think of like things in the original show a lot differently because you know Iroh he wasn't banished. It was just Zuko. Iroh just happened to go along, and I don't think the OG show ever explained that. This show, however, it kind of gave me the sense that like Iroh went with Zuko because he wanted to protect him in a way that he couldn't when Lu-Ten was out. So I was like, okay, that like I already knew that like Iroh saw Zuko as his son and Zuko saw like Iroh as a father he never had type of thing. Like it was that type of relationship, but like they devoted a scene to that where it's like, oh, Zuko asks Iroh like, why are you coming with me? I don't need a babysitter. And Iroh's like, well, how about a friend? I was like, okay. That hit the feels a little bit. That hit the feels a little bit. I will say. I will say that much. That gave me like a new perspective on like their relationship, and I thought they did that really well. And then the visual effects, the costuming, the set building, 10 out of 10, 11 out of 10. Like no one can say that like those three things, the visual effects, the sets, and the sets when they're not like the obvious like what's it called, the volume CGI things, like actual sets where like they're in like a building or like a temple or something like that, like that's great. That's pretty much it that I have to say that I liked. I mean, they did incorporate some of the OG music in there. I think that Lu-Ten funeral scene, they played like what's it called, Leaves from the Vine. Yeah, Leaves from the Vine. They played like the like the chords of it. So that's something I liked a lot. Also Firelord Ozai. I know people didn't like that he was included in the show. Um, I kind of liked that he was because like Daniel Day Kim did a fantastic job. He kind of made it his own thing. Like he really excels. Like you really get to see how manipulative and abusive he is because he does kind of play games with Azula. He doesn't give her credit that she obviously craves. Ozai knows. Ozai knows that like she's a fierce, cunning warrior, but like he kind of doesn't recognize that to like push her further and further to the edge. So getting to see that, because really we only see Ozai in like a silhouette for like book 1 and book 2, but in book 3, that's when we finally see him, and then like even then it's not a whole lot, you know. So I think like you really don't understand how like terrifying and menacing Ozai is until the finale, when it's the Sozin's Comet. That's when you really get to see like, oh, this guy means business. But like in this live action series, I don't, what we've seen, it was probably like maybe 10, 15, 20 minutes of screen time. Dude was a beast. He was a beast, and he's not someone to be trifled with. So so yeah, I really like that inclusion. Um, and naturally, Azula's inclusion was needed as well. If you're gonna include Ozai, you're gonna have to include, you know, Azula, because she's still in the Fire Nation, roaming around. As for what I didn't like about the show, I think the main thing is that it tries to be too serious. I think the creator wanted to go for like a Game of Thrones vibe. Now, I've never seen Game of Thrones. I've seen clips here and there. I don't think that it captured the Game of Thrones like to an extent it did, but it just it just doesn't fit this show. It doesn't fit this show because the main characters are children. So why are you trying to achieve a grown adult tone for like a show that's centered around children? That was my issue. The original show, it had a balance between being funny and being serious. You know, when it was time to be serious, it was time to be serious, and you know they might sprinkle in a joke here and there, but like there was a balance. With this show, it's like 90% serious, mature. I don't want to say gritty, but like, you know, like with the cinematography, it's kind of giving that, and it just doesn't sit well with me. It doesn't sit well with me at all. I think they forgot to include a lot of humor. Like that's another thing too. Like the show's not that funny. It's not that funny. I know animation, you can kind of get away with a lot of humor with like facial expressions and, you know, like weird transitions, stuff like that. So like animation humor is a lot different than like live action humor. But even then, it's not funny. And when it tries to be funny, it's not. Like Sokka is the main one that makes the most of the jokes. He's not. Those jokes aren't hitting. They're not hitting for nothing. So that's like a big thing that I think stood out to me, is that the show is not, you know, funny, and that they're not trying to go for that tone, and it just didn't sit well with me. A lot of the character work as well. Sokka, they did this weird thing with Sokka that I just don't. So basically, Sokka's main thing in the show is that he was left behind to protect the village. You know, dad left me in charge. And I think in like the third or fourth episode, when he meets the mechanist, the guy who builds the air balloon, he basically he kind of tells him that like you should focus on the gifts that you were given. So I guess he's kind of trying to tell him that you're not a warrior, you're an engineer. And it just didn't sit well with me that like that was like the direction they were going with his character. I think they should have just like basically said like, oh yeah, like you're a warrior, but you're also a strategist, you're also an engineer, you're all of these things. Like you're not just one thing. You can be multiple things. Even Katara just feels very bland. Like she doesn't have a personality compared to the original, where like, you know, she's like very fierce and like doesn't let anyone tell her what to do, and she's kind of motherly. You know, they make fun of her for that, for like, you know, being the mom of the group. um and you know, in this one, it's like I guess the only real thing that she has going for her is when they get to the North Pole and she starts learning waterbending, but like they're like, nah, like you can't learn waterbending, you're a girl. Like that storyline. By the way, this is no shade to like the actors that play them, like no shade at all. I'm just judging the characters. I just want to get that out there. Even Aang, they spend too much time like being like, oh, like you were gone for like 100 years, like you you were the Avatar and you left us, da 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 da. And it's like, okay, the original show, you know, does have those like elements here and there, but it's just overbearing, you know? Like I think Boomy's whole purpose in the live action show is that he's there to remind Aang like, oh, you left us, and you're responsible. You made the world worse or whatever kind of thing. And even the avatars, like his previous avatars, Roku, Kyoshi, Kurok, like he speaks to all three of the previous avatars, not just Roku. Um, he, all three of them are kind of like, in a way, they're kind of like trauma dumping on him, which is kind of funny. Like, obviously, Kyoshi, she stands on business. She's not gonna sugarcoat anything. But like, Roku, like, he felt immensely responsible for the war starting because he didn't take action to stop Sozin. Like, he could have stopped Sozin right then and there, but because he was his friend, he was like, "I'm gonna spare you mercy." And then when the time came, it's like where like Roku needed help, Sozin was like, "Nah, I'm gonna let you die." Taking that away really affected like Aang's storyline, because it's like he does feel guilt. Aang does feel guilt in the original show, but it's kind of like wiped away in a few episodes. Like there's that whole episode where they're in the cave and he's talking about the day he left and how he ended up in the iceberg. Like that episode alone was great because it told us like, hey, this is how Aang feels about this. Aang, you're here now. Stop harping on the past. Let's move on. One episode. It might have been brought up a second time, but it's just one episode. They spend the entire season, the Netflix show, they spend the entire season like keep coming back to it, keep coming back to it. Aang, you left. Aang, you left. What are you gonna do? What are you gonna do? Da 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 da. It's like, oh my gosh, it's so annoying. It was so annoying. And then like they did this thing with Gyatso. Gyatso was in the spirit world. Um, his spirit, uh, it's nothing strange. Like it's not a knock. Like there was Iroh in Legend of Korra did the same thing where his spirit was allowed to stay in the spirit world. Gyatso pretty much said, "Hey man, there was nothing you could have done that night. If you were there, you would have died too. So just move on and let go." When he said that, I was like, "Thank you," because I don't want to hear this, gibberish ever again. Like I don't want to go back to him feeling guilty about him leaving and stuff like that. Next episode. Yeah, man, I I feel bad for leaving. Why did I leave? Like I was like, "Oh my gosh. Can't deal with it. Can't deal with it." But yeah, that's enough about the characters. This one isn't really the fault of like the creators or the people that worked on the show. It's really a fault of like this era of streaming that we've like been accustomed to, and it's the fact that the show is only 8 episodes long. Granted, when I peeped that about a while before the release, I was like, oh yeah, they're definitely going to condense um the series, maybe combine 2 episodes into one. Really, by just like having 8 episodes, like condensing 20 episodes into 8 episodes, really like affected with the pacing a lot. And within those 20 episodes, it's like Aang, Katara, Sokka, they all had time to like grow and like develop their skills. Like they developed those characters into better leaders, better fighters, better benders even. That brings up another point. They, you would think, that in the first season, Aang is like, oh, I'm the Avatar. I have to learn all 4 elements, right? I already mastered air. While I'm on my way to the north, because the original plot for why they're going to the north isn't to like find a master. It's to warn them because he gets a vision that there's an attack at the north. So he's like, oh, we have to go to the north because I saw a vision of Fire Nation attacking. We have to go help them. It's not like, oh, we're traveling to the north to learn, to find a master to learn waterbending. So within those 8 episodes, there's not a single scene. Where Aang is learning waterbending with Katara. Because Katara got the scroll when she left the South Pole. Her grandma had the scroll already and like gave it to her. She's like, "Hey, study these while you're gone," right? So Katara is the one studying. Waterbending, but Aang isn't. Aang doesn't spend a single minute studying waterbending. Just give us something like him bending some water here and there. Like it just didn't make sense to me why they didn't spend time with Aang waterbending. And I think what's gonna happen is that season 2 comes around, off screen, he's learned waterbending. And I think that also like kind of affects Aang and Katara's relationship in the show because the times they spend together like waterbending is like when Aang is like kind of like flirting with her. So it's like, and they don't really like showcase their romance that much in the adaptation, which is like I can see that being a big deal for other people. For me, it's not that big of a deal. Like I'm sure they'll get to it, but still, it's like just tease it a little bit, you know. And you would tease that by having them waterbend, right? Also having those 8 episodes. I think I already said this. That like it would help them like build better chemistry amongst the team, because like I kind of felt watching it, it's like they're not really team Avatar, you know. There's like no chemistry, no bond between the group. It just kind of feels like they're still kind of strangers, or they're kind of like co-workers in a way. It's an interesting dynamic, I feel, but hopefully, you know, in season 2 they'll fix that a bit. But yeah, those side quests definitely helped build a stronger bond amongst the group, and by condensing everything, it kind of like moved the plot really fast. Yeah, the writing too, um, it's kind of a mess. Like a lot of the reveals, just came like it just left a bad taste in my mouth. Pause. Cause like Grand pretty much basically like gives the intro. It's like long ago the four nations were at peace. Da 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 da. You know. She gives that whole explanation. She pretty much points out that, oh, Aang, you're the Avatar, you're the last Airbender. Instead of Aang finding out when he goes to the Southern Air Temple and is like, oh, they're all gone. Like that was a lot more impactful. Him finding out by like seeing all the dead bodies, as opposed to his grandmother being like, oh, yeah, all the air nomads are gone. You're the last Airbender. He's also the Avatar. It's been 100 years since you've been gone. That like she revealed so much in that scene that it's like it's so many like bombs. It's like you can't even react to it. It's like what the fuck, you know? That was an insane scene. And then even Zuko's like Agni Kai, like that war room scene was like kind of cringe a little bit, because he was like, oh, this is a bad plan, and then Ozai's like, there's only one way to sell this. Agni Kai. I was like, what? I was like, what? Like the storytelling with how because Iroh was the narrator in the original show, explaining like, oh, like this is the origin of Zuko. It was like, oh, like this is some great storytelling, and paralleling it with Aang's story was like fantastic. But like this one, it just felt like, oh, this is something we have to hit. So how are we gonna like, you know, do it in a way that it's not copying the original, but like still have some weight to it? And it did not have any weight. And even like the setting for the Acne Kai, it just felt like they did it in their backyard. I have a theory that I think a lot of people won't like, and I think that like because Aang ended up with Katara in the original show, I think Zutara might be endgame. I think Zutara might be endgame for the sake of switching things up and making things different. If that does happen, it's already annoying online. Like you see all kinds of takes and people's opinions on it. If they make Zutara like canon, man, we'll never hear the end of it. We'll never hear the end of it. I not looking forward to that day. But hopefully, let's fingers crossed it doesn't happen. But I wouldn't I wouldn't put it past me. I think it could happen. Yeah, there's some other things in here that like I don't really care for. Is how I'll describe it. Like I don't really care about like the bending style. Like it doesn't look. Someone said that like the way they bend in the show, it's like they're casting magic. There's like a scene where Fire Lord Ozai, he doesn't like bend fire out of his fist. He like sparks an earthbender on fire in his throne room. Like he just kind of made fire out of nothing. Like I don't know. I thought it was cool. I thought it was cool. I didn't really care for that scene. I was like, damn. The other thing I liked about this show is that they really, even though I said like the tone is like trying to be more mature, I do kind of like that like they kind of like aren't afraid to like get a little like gruesome with it, because like a lot of the firebending deaths, or like people who are killed by firebending, it's gruesome, you know, like they're actually getting burned alive. It's not like they're just getting hit and like, you know, oh, they're good. Like no, they're actually getting burnt and like to a crisp. So yeah, that's one thing I liked. I didn't really care for that scene There's also another scene people are talking about that, like, they're saying that Aang was flying, and I remember watching that. And being like, is he flying? Like, I don't know. But then I had to remember that, like, this is live action now, so you don't really have that benefit of like seeing the air or whatever. But in the original show, Aang is pretty light on his feet, and there's a lot of times where he's like gliding without his glider, or like falling and like going with like the currents of the wind. And I think that's what was going on in this scene too.
He's not flying, he's just falling and going with the current of the wind pretty gracefully. He's using his airbending to propel himself and push him off and, go from this tower to that tower. It's like, it's not that big of a deal. That also tells me that, like, there's people out there that, like, didn't watch Legend of Korra, and if you did, you would know that you would know what real flying is. Boomy, I said, kind of like they changed his character to being like a guilt trip type of character. He wasn't like, the friendly, crazy king that he was in the original show. He was kind of like a bitter, cynical kind of person, and I didn't really care for that. Like, obviously, like, people who, like, 100 years of war would definitely, like, affect someone's, like, attitude and mindset or whatever. So when you see your best friend, who happens to be the Avatar, return, and it's like, where were you all this time? You could have helped us, da 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 da. Like, realistically, yeah, there'd be some bitterness there. So I don't really care for that plot that much. Azula too, the inclusion of Azula early on. It's interesting to see her relationship with her father, because we don't get to see that until book 3 almost. It's really her relationship with her mother that really affects her. So to see her father kind of like not recognize her or give her credit when credit is due really affects her or pushes her. That was okay. I didn't really mind that. And I do think that, like, they included some of, like, the characters that are introduced in later seasons, like Azula, like Ozai. I think they did that just because, you don't know if this show's gonna be around for season 2. Shows get canceled left and right. So if they're like, if this is our one shot at adapting Netflix or adapting Avatar, let's include Ozai, let's include Azula, these fan favorite characters, and let's give them their light before, we get canceled. If we get canceled, at least you say, hey, here's live action Ozai, here's live action Azula. I didn't really care for that, honestly. In closing, I would say the show, it's not as bad as the movie. It's not as bad as the movie. But it's not a masterpiece. It's not great. It's not a 10 out of 10. For me, I would say it's like a 6 out of 10 at best. At best it's a 6 out of 10. But it does have the potential to be better. It does have the potential to be better. I think, the writers, the creators, the actors, they're going to look at all the criticism and, like, be like, okay, we missed the mark here, but we can definitely improve here. Like, I definitely feel like the show has potential to be a lot better. So I'm looking forward to book 2. If they get a book 2, I mean, they'll get a book 2. They'll get a season 2. I just think they need to find a balance. That's like the main thing. They need to find a balance between being like goofy and being children, and then like being serious and like, we're at war. We need a fight, I think a solution for that, and I think they might go for this, is that you break up books 2 and 3 into like multiple seasons. So you do like season 2 would be like book 2 episodes 1 through 10. A good place to end it would be like the desert episode when Aang loses Appa. That'd be a cool season finale, mini season finale. Going forward, I think it'd make a lot more sense to like break it up, because if they do all of book 2 in one season and then all of book 3 in one season, that's like 24 episodes. So you're gonna tell us this gigantic story for 24 episodes? I don't think so. I think that's literally one season of Avatar: The Last Airbender. That's one season of Avatar: The Last Airbender and some change. They did kind of like a post-credit scene at the end, and there was like, oh, Sozin's Comet is coming. I might have to rewatch some of those scenes because I don't know if they specified that Sozin's Comet comes 100 years. I think they might rework when Sozin Comet arrives just so it aligns with like the timeline of the show, because I think the show might, like, within the show, the Netflix show, they might make it last 5 years maybe, because you're obviously, they're not gonna start filming the show right away. You're obviously gonna see changes with the actors, like they're kids, so you're obviously gonna see changes. They're also obviously gonna get a lot older, so the original series took place in 6 months. There's no way you're gonna notice like they've grown a lot within 6 months of the show, but it's been like 5 years since the show's been in production, if that makes sense. So I definitely think they're gonna adjust the timeline to where it's like the show is aging as the kids are aging. So Aang might not fight the Fire Lord till he's like 18. But yeah, I think that's all I have to say about the show. I don't hate it, but I don't love it. So that's my opinion on it. I do think that The Legend of Korra could benefit from this this type of tone, like a Netflix version. Because first of all, Legend of Korra isn't like well received in the community. Like, you obviously have your diehard fans that love the show, but then the majority of people who like watched Avatar: The Last Airbender and tried to get into Korra, they're like, this ain't it. This ain't it. So I think a live action Korra show with this tone, with this like, production value, could make people change their opinion about Legend of Korra. It could benefit and add on to Legend of Korra, because Legend of Korra isn't a well received show. I think live action adaptations should like add more value to a show that isn't well received or kind of missed the mark when it originally ran, as opposed to a show that's like 10 out of 10 when it ran, and then you try to make a live action adaptation. Like, imagine if The Last Airbender was like a 5 out of 10 show, right? It was a 5 out of 10 show when it first aired. Then you get the live action, the Netflix live action, and people are like, wow, this is incredible. Like, I can't believe they didn't do this when it first aired or whatever. Maybe I need to go back and watch the Last Avatar, and like look at it at a different light now. Like, maybe I judged it too bad. That's how I feel about Legend of Korra. If they did a live action Legend of Korra, it would definitely like change a lot of people's perception about that show. Me personally, Legend of Korra is amazing. I'm not gonna cap with you. Legend of Korra is amazing. Book 2 is like the worst. That is the worst book out of the show. But yeah, overall it's a decent show. It's not as good as The Last Airbender, but it's solid on its own. That's pretty much it that I have to say about the show. Again, no shade to the actors that played them. They did their job. They did what they could. They're only gonna get better from here. Obviously, like the older actors, like the guy who played Zhao, the Daniel Day Kim's Ozai, like those are veteran actors. I think the guy who plays Zuko, he's kind of an established actor already, but like Sokka, Katara, Aang, I think they all are relatively new, so they'll only get better from here. That's my only hope.